Ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here. Sorry I couldn't be here today, so I'm just going to quickly talk over the quiz review so you kind of get that review before you go into taking your quiz today. So when you're taking a look at number 1, notice the directions say to factor out the greatest common factor. So I'm trying to figure out first what divides 4 and 20. So again, if you're struggling with what divides 4 and 20, you can still make out those factor lists. So what goes into 4 is 1 and 4. And 2 and 2. What goes into 20 is 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. And the biggest number that overlaps those two lists is 4 in each one. So I know for sure I can take out a greatest common factor of 4. Now I see an A here, but there isn't an A in my second term, so I can't take out an A. And same with a B. There's no B in my first term, so I can't take out a B. So all I'm doing is dividing each of those terms by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is just 1. I don't have to write the 1 when it's a coefficient, so I'm just going to write that as A. I won't take away points if you put the 1 there, but you don't have to. Then 20 divided by 4 is 5, and then you have B. Okay? Taking a look at number 2, a lot of students try and factor this by grouping, but remember that the directions say to factor out the greatest common factor. So I'm taking a look at 8, 12, 4, and 16, and I'm trying to figure out what divides each of those variables. Well, that's going to be 4. 4 divides each of those evenly, so I know for sure I'm dividing by 4. And then I want to figure out how many x's. I have x to the fourth, x to the third, x squared, and x. So the largest amount of x's that I can take out of each one without overdrawing my bank account. Now remember, you can't take out more than you have, is x. So we're dividing each of these terms by 4x. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. X to the fourth divided by x to the first is x cubed. Negative 12 divided by 4 is going to be negative 3. X to the third, there's 3 x's there. We're dividing one away. That's going to become x squared. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is going to cancel to 1, so I'm not going to write that 1. I don't need to when it's a coefficient. X squared divided by x is just x. Negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4, and x over x will cancel out to 1. So again, I don't need to write it. So this right here is the final answer. The biggest mistake I see students make when they do this quiz is that they forget to write their greatest common factor on the outside. So make sure once you divide out your greatest common factor that you're actually writing it on the outside of those parentheses. Let's take a look at number 3. So we're trying to figure out what divides 18 and 6. Well, that's going to be 6. Again, if you're still not sure about what divides what, make out those factor lists. Find the biggest number. So then I see that I have x to the first in here, but I have no x's here. Okay, I can't take out any x's. I have y to the fourth here and y to the first here. So the most I can take out of both without overdrawing my bank account is y to the first. Then I have z to the third here and z to the fifth here. So I can take z to the third out of each without overdrawing my bank account. So I'm dividing this by 6y z to the third and 6, come on, 6y z to the third. So when I divide those out, 18 divided by 6 is 3. That x is going to stay there because I didn't divide it by anything. Y to the fourth divided by y to the first is going to give me y cubed when you subtract out those exponents. Z to the third over z to the third cancels out. Next, 6 over 6 will cancel out to 1, so I don't need to write that 1 because it's a coefficient. Now if 1 was a constant, if it was just the 1, then I would have to write it. Y over y cancels to 1, so I don't have to write it for this time because it'll be a coefficient. Z to the fifth divided by z to the third is going to be z squared. So this right here is my final answer for number 3. Now let's take a look at number 4. So I want to figure out what divides 4, 6, and 10, and that's going to be 2. Now, a lot of students try and take an x out, but there's no x in the last term. So all we can take out is a 2. So all I'm doing is dividing each of my exponents by 2. So that right there is my final answer when I divide everything by 2. Next, let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, we're trying to figure out what divides 5 and 20. Well, what divides 5 and 20? That's going to be 5. So I'm taking each of these terms and I'm dividing them by 5. So 5 divided by 5, well, that's going to cancel out to 1, so I'm going to leave that as x squared. 20 divided by 5, that's going to give me 4. Okay, so this right here is my final answer. Again, I couldn't take any x's out because this term right here did not have an x in it. Let's take a look at number 6. So for number 6, I'm trying to figure out what divides 3, 6, and 9, and that's going to be 3. I have x to the third here, x squared here, and x here. So I can take out an x. So I'm going to divide each of these by 3x. So 3 divided by 3 is going to cancel out to 1, so that's going to be a coefficient. X cubed divided by x to the first is going to be x squared. And then 6 divided by 3 is going to be 2. X squared divided by x is just going to be x, because 2 minus 1 is x to the 1. Negative 9 divided by 3 is going to be negative 3, and that x over x is going to cancel out. So we're left with this guy right here. Next, let's go ahead and now we're going to factor these by grouping. So I'm going to make my two groups here. And remember, you're taking the greatest common factor out of each group. So when you make your first group, what do you get between x squared and 2x? Well, you can divide out an x. You can't divide out any number because there's no number other than 1 that you can simplify 1 and 2 by. So you're dividing each of these terms by x. X squared divided by x is just x. 2x divided by x is 2. So between 4 and 8, what can you divide out? Well, you can divide out a 4. So we're going to divide each of these by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is just 1, so I'm just going to keep that x there. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So now if you look, my leftover parentheses are matching. So I can go ahead and factor out those leftover parentheses. And once I've factored those out, I need to write what's left over, which is going to be x plus 4. So then I have x plus 2 and x plus 4. Next, let's take a look at number 8. So for number 8, again, I'm going to make my two groups. Between 2x squared and 6x, I can divide out a 2. I can also take an x out of each term. So I'm dividing each of these by 2x. So 2 divided by 2 cancels out. X squared divided by x to the first is just x. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and x over x cancels out. Out of my second group now, what can I divide 3 and 9 by? Well, I can divide them both by 3. I can't take an x out because there isn't an x in each term. So I'm dividing each of these by 3. And then I end up getting x plus 3. So I notice that my leftovers here are matching, so I can go ahead and factor those out. Once I've factored those out and I've gotten rid of those, I can write what's left after that, which is 2x plus 3. So this right here is my final answer. Notice how I'm writing the two parentheses right next to each other, and they're being multiplied. There is no plus sign in the middle. It's just the two parentheses right next to each other being multiplied, because that's another mistake I see students make. All right, next, let's take a look at number 9. So for number 9, we're going to make our two groups. So between 2 and 4, I can divide out a 2. And then you can also take c to the first out of each, since there's a c in each term. So what I'm doing is I'm dividing everything in this first group by 2c. Well, 2 over 2 cancels, c over c cancels, and I'm just left with b. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and c over c there is going to cancel. Then here we have 6 and negative 12. What divides 6 and negative 12? Well, that's going to be 6. So we're taking and we're dividing each of these by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and then we just have b. Negative 12 divided by 6 is negative 2. So again, if we did this right, our leftovers are matching. If they're not matching, then you did something wrong. So we have b minus 2 that we can factor out. And once we get rid of b minus 2, I'm going to write in the second parenthesis what's left over, which is 2c plus 6. So again, there's two factors being multiplied. So I see some students that try and go back and do the box method. If you go back and do the box method, that's a great way of checking your answer. If you do the box method, you should get that answer back if you've done it correctly. So that's just something interesting you could try if you'd like. Last but not least, let's try number 10. So now we're going to factor by grouping. So what divides 4 and 8? Well, that's going to be 4. I can also take an s out of each term. So I'm dividing each of these by 4s. So 4 divided by 4 cancels, s over s cancels, and I'm left with r. 8 divided by 4 is 2. S over S cancels, and I'm left with P. Out of the second group, 2 and 4, I can take out a 2, and I can also take an M out of each term. So when I take out an M, I'm going to be left with R plus 2P. So again, my leftovers are matching, so I can factor those out. And then I'm going to write what's left after that, which is here. And this right here is your final answer for number 10. All right, let's take a look at number 11. So for number 11, to me, this looks like it's the easiest to use elimination because I have same number opposite signs on my x's. Once you have same number opposite signs, you can go ahead and add down the columns. So 2x minus 2x cancels out. Y plus 5y is 6y. 8 plus 4 is 12. So now to solve for y, we need to divide both sides by 6. So for number 11, you end up getting y is equal to 2. So now we know that y is equal to 2. So where I see y up here, I can plug in 2. So I'm just going to plug it into the first one. Remember, it doesn't matter which one you plug it into. So now I'm taking y out completely, and I'm putting 2 in instead. So now I'm going to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and then I'm going to get 2x is equal to 6. And then we're going to divide both sides by 2, and I get that x is equal to 3. So now I want to write my answer out as a coordinate point. First my x, then my y. So my answer here is 3, 2. Now let's take a look at number 12. Since this is already in standard form, I'm going to use elimination again. I see that my x's have the same coefficient, but they don't have opposite signs. So I'm going to take this bottom one and multiply it by a -1. So I have x plus 2y is equal to 11. Now I'm changing that second equation, and I'm going to change every sign in that second equation. And now I'm going to add down the columns. X minus x cancels out. 2y minus y is y. 11 minus 8 is going to give you 3. So now I know that y is equal to 3. So I'm going to take the fact that y is equal to 3, and I'm going to plug it in for one of these y's so that I can get my x. I'm going to plug it into the second one this time just for something different. So now I'm going to take y out completely and put 3 in instead, and that's going to be equal to 8. Then I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and I get that x is equal to 5. So now I want to write that out as a coordinate point. First my x, then my y. So that right there is my final answer for number 12. So that concludes your note video today. Thank you for listening. And once you're done, what I want you to do is turn in your review to the substitute. And then once you've turned in your review, they will give you a copy of the test. Thanks for listening.